Chapter 1. The waters are rising. I can feel the earth trembling beneath my feet as I write these words onto the recording crystal that I hope will survive what is to come. My name is Atlan Ra, guardian of the third temple of light in what your time will call Atlantis, and I document this knowledge not to preserve the memory of our lost greatness, but to deliver the keys that will allow future generations to recover what we lost, the complete connection to your multidimensional nature, and the power to be consciously reborn in every moment of your existence. What you are about to read did not come into your hands by chance. These words were encoded into master crystals that were strategically dispersed around the planet before the final cataclysm, awaiting the precise moment when humanity would be ready to receive them again. That moment is now. If you are reading this, it is because your soul recognizes the frequency of these teachings, because perhaps you were here with me in those final days, or because your spiritual lineage has prepared you for this reunion with the wisdom we thought was lost forever. Allow me to begin not with abstract theories, but with a truth that changed my life when it was revealed to me by my own teachers what would be 80 years in your time. All human suffering, all limitation, all feeling of separation from the divine arises from one single fundamental forgetting. You have forgotten who you truly are. You are not these bodies of flesh that you temporarily inhabit. You are not the stories your mind tells about who you believe you are. You are eternal consciousness, immortal sparks of the creative source, temporarily experiencing the density of physical matter for specific purposes of evolution and service. In Atlantis, before arrogance and the misuse of power precipitated our fall, we understood this truth not as abstract philosophy, but as practical, applicable knowledge. Our temples were not places of passive worship, but spiritual laboratories where precise techniques were taught and practiced to maintain awareness of the multidimensional nature of being. Every citizen completed basic training in what we called navigation of the subtle bodies, and those who showed advanced aptitude were invited to deeper studies in the mystery schools. We directly observed what you in your time are just beginning to rediscover, that the physical body is only the densest layer of a much more complex structure. Surrounding and penetrating your body of flesh exists what we called the etheric body, an exact energetic duplicate composed of substance more subtle than physical matter, but denser than pure thought. This etheric body functions as an organizing template that sustains the physical form, and when it is distorted by trauma, toxicity, or emotional imbalance, these distortions eventually manifest as illness on the physical level. Beyond the etheric body, we perceived the astral body, the vehicle of emotions and desires. During sleep, this body can partially separate from the physical and travel to realms your traditions call the astral plane. Many of your most vivid dreams are actually memories of these nightly excursions, although you rarely remember them clearly upon waking, because the transition between states of consciousness typically fragments the memory. Chapter 2, the mental body constitutes the next level of your multidimensional anatomy. Here reside not only your conscious thoughts, but also the belief structures, habitual thought patterns, and what you might call your mental programming. This mental body determines how you interpret reality, what possibilities you can conceive, and what limitations you accept as immutable. Much of the work of spiritual transformation involves consciously reprogramming this mental body to release limiting beliefs that were installed during childhood or inherited from your ancestors. Beyond these lower bodies exist the higher spiritual bodies. The causal body stores the records of all your incarnations, the lessons learned, the talents developed, the karmas created and resolved. The Buddhic body connects you with universal cosmic consciousness, allowing experiences of unity with all creation. And at the deepest core resides your monad, the immortal divine spark that is literally an individualized fragment of God experiencing itself. In Atlantis, we understood that the soul, that intermediate aspect between the temporary personality and the eternal spirit, uses these multidimensional structures as vehicles for its evolution. Each incarnation is an opportunity for the soul to develop specific qualities, resolve karmic patterns, and expand its capacity to express love, wisdom, and divine power in increasingly refined ways. But we also understood something your current civilization has almost completely forgotten: that these subtle bodies are not static, but dynamic, constantly responding to your thoughts, emotions, choices, and the energetic environment in which you move. You can, with proper training, learn to perceive these subtle bodies directly, to identify where they are distorted or blocked, and to apply specific techniques to restore their optimal configuration. This was the basis of our Atlantean medicine. We did not treat physical symptoms in isolation, but identified the underlying energetic causes in the subtle bodies and addressed them directly. A chronic headache could be traced to a constriction in the etheric body caused by the suppression of creative expression. A heart disease could originate in the emotional body, where patterns of unresolved resentment had created blocks in the flow of vital energy. What precipitated our fall was not a random natural disaster, as your historians speculate, but a direct consequence of having lost this holistic understanding. In the final centuries before the cataclysm, a faction of our society began to use the spiritual technologies our ancestors had developed for purposes of power and control instead of healing and evolution. They manipulated the energetic bodies of others without consent. They used crystals not to amplify light, but to project influences that served selfish agendas. Chapter 3. This violation of fundamental spiritual laws created massive distortions in the collective energy field of our civilization. What many did not understand is that when you manipulate subtle energies in ways that violate free will or cause harm, these distortions not only affect the direct victims, but also propagate through the morphogenetic field that connects all members of the species. Eventually, these accumulated distortions reached critical mass and manifested as the physical cataclysm that sank our continents beneath the waters. I write this not to induce guilt or fear, but to warn. Your current civilization is dangerously approaching a similar point. The technologies you have developed, although different in form from ours, possess a similar potential to be misused in ways that could precipitate catastrophic consequences. But I also write with hope, because unlike us, you now have access to the records of what happened and the opportunity to choose a different path. The inner rebirth that this journal is about is precisely the antidote to repeating our mistakes. When enough individuals complete this process of conscious awakening, remembering their multidimensional nature and learning to operate from spiritual integrity, they create a morphogenetic field of coherence that can counterbalance the distortions generated by those who still operate from ignorance or malice. Allow me now to describe how we worked with crystals in the healing temples, because this knowledge will be crucial for your own transformation process. Crystals are not simply inert minerals, as your materialistic science assumes. They are highly organized structures of crystallized consciousness that can store, amplify, and transmit specific frequencies of energy. In our main temples, we used what we called master crystals, quartz formations that had been cultivated for centuries under specific conditions to optimize their clarity and potency. These master crystals functioned as nodes in planetary energy networks, helping to maintain the stability of the Earth's electromagnetic field and facilitating communication between different knowledge centers around the world. But more relevant to your personal work are the techniques we taught for working with smaller individual crystals. Each type of crystal resonates with specific frequencies that correspond to different aspects of your subtle anatomy. Clear quartz, the most versatile of all, can be programmed for any healing purpose through the conscious intention of the practitioner. It functions as a neutral amplifier that intensifies any frequency directed through it. Chapter 4. Amethyst resonates specifically with the higher spiritual bodies and was used in our temples to facilitate states of deep meditation and access to the Akashic records. When placed on the third eye during contemplative practices, amethyst can dramatically amplify clairvoyant perception and facilitate connection with spiritual guides operating in higher dimensions. Rose quartz works primarily with the emotional body, particularly with patterns related to love, forgiveness, and the healing of heart wounds. In our therapies, we used rose quartz to help people who had experienced severe relational trauma to release the energetic impressions these traumas had left in their auric field. Citrine connects with the mental body and was especially useful for people struggling with negative thought patterns or deeply rooted limiting beliefs. The golden frequency of citrine can literally dissolve crystallized thought formations that have been operating automatically for years, creating space for new, more constructive patterns to be established. Lapis lazuli was considered sacred in our temples because it facilitated what we called soul vision, the ability to directly perceive a person's purpose and evolutionary path. Priest healers who worked with spiritual guidance typically wore lapis lazuli on their foreheads during sessions with seekers who needed clarity about their life direction. But let me be clear, crystals by themselves do not perform the work of transformation. They are tools, amplifiers of the practitioner's conscious intention. A crystal in the hands of someone who does not understand the principles of energy work will produce minimal effects. But in the hands of someone trained in the appropriate techniques, the same crystal can facilitate profound and lasting changes. The basic technique we taught involved what we called crystal attunement. First, you must clear the crystal of any previous energetic impressions that may be stored in its matrix. This is achieved by placing the crystal under running water for several minutes, while visualizing all old energies being completely washed away. Some crystals, particularly those that have been used in healing work for severe trauma, may require deeper cleansing through exposure to sunlight for several hours or by burying them in sea salt overnight. Once clean, the crystal must be programmed with your specific intention. Hold the crystal in your dominant hand and focus your mind completely on the purpose for which you wish to use it. If it is for healing a specific emotional pattern, visualize that pattern being transformed. If it is for amplifying your meditation, visualize the crystal facilitating deeper states of consciousness. Maintain this visualization for at least 3 minutes, allowing the intention to imprint onto the crystal matrix. Chapter 5. The programmed crystal then functions as an ally in your transformation work. When you meditate with it, when you carry it with you, or when you place it in your healing space, it continues to radiate the frequency with which it was programmed, constantly reminding you of your intention and amplifying your efforts for change. In the main healing temples, we used elaborate configurations of multiple crystals arranged in specific geometric patterns. These crystal geometries created energy fields that could facilitate transformations that would be impossible or would require years to achieve through individual effort alone. A person entering a properly configured crystal healing chamber could experience in one session the release of traumas that had been affecting them their entire life. But I must warn about something that contributed to our fall: the use of crystals to manipulate or control others. Some of our scientist priests discovered that specific crystal configurations could be used to project influences onto the energy field of people at a distance, altering their emotional states, implanting suggestions in their subconscious minds, or even interfering with their ability to access their own natural spiritual powers. This technology was initially developed with seemingly beneficial intentions, to relieve mental suffering in people who could not help themselves, to prevent violent behavior in dangerous individuals, to facilitate social order in large communities. But like all powerful technology, it was quickly appropriated by those with less noble motives. Those seeking power began to use these techniques for mass control, suppression of dissent, and manipulation of entire populations. The karmic consequences of these violations of free will were devastating. Each act of non-consensual energetic manipulation created what we called karmic knots, distortions in the fabric of the collective morphogenetic field that eventually had to be resolved, typically through experiences that allowed the perpetrators to understand from the other side what it feels like to be a victim of such manipulation. When enough of these karmic knots accumulated in the Atlantean collective field, we reached a point of no return. The distortions were so massive that only a complete reset, a cataclysm that dissolved the physical structures sustaining these distorted patterns, could create the possibility for eventual healing and renewed evolution. Chapter 6. What I want you to understand is that you carry impressions of these events in your own energy fields. If you feel an inexplicable attraction to knowledge about Atlantis, if you experience a feeling of nostalgia when contemplating crystals or sacred geometries, if you carry deep fears about the misuse of spiritual power, it is likely that your souls were present during those final times and you carry cellular memories of what happened. These are not simply interesting historical memories. They are active impressions in your energy field that continue to influence your choices, your fears, and your patterns of self-sabotage in your current life. Many people who were healers or spiritual teachers in Atlantis developed, after witnessing the horrors of the misuse of power, what we might call subconscious vows to never again reclaim their power, to remain small and invisible, to not develop their spiritual capacities because they fear they might be misused again. These subconscious vows, although understandable given the trauma that generated them, now severely limit you. They prevent you from accessing capacities you need to navigate the challenges of your current incarnation and to serve the consciousness elevation of your civilization. An essential part of the inner rebirth is to identify these ancient vows, understand their origins, honor the protective intentions that generated them, and then consciously release them as no longer appropriate for your present circumstances. The technique we taught for releasing ancient soul vows and contracts involved entering a deep meditative state and formulating a clear intention to connect with the specific memory where the vow was made. Frequently, this memory emerges spontaneously as a vision of yourselves in another time, in another body, experiencing the circumstances that motivated the vow. Once you can perceive the memory, dialogue with that younger version of your soul. Explain that you understand why it made that vow, that you honor the wisdom that informed that decision at that time, but that now the circumstances are different and the vow no longer serves you. Ask permission from that part of yourself to release the vow, and if it grants it, pronounce out loud a formal declaration. I, your name, now revoke and completely release the vow I made and briefly describe the circumstance. 2. State the specific vow. I recognize that this vow served me then, but no longer serves me now. I release it with gratitude and love. Chapter 7. Many of you will experience immediate release of patterns that have been limiting you throughout your entire current life. Others may require multiple sessions working with different vows and contracts that were created at different moments in your soul history. Be patient with the process. These patterns were installed during intensely emotional experiences and require time to completely unravel. Now I must speak about something that is simultaneously the deepest wound and the greatest opportunity that humanity carries since the fall of Atlantis: the collective disconnection from your divine nature. When our continent sank, we did not only lose physical structures and technologies, we lost the living knowledge, transmitted from teacher to student, of how to maintain conscious connection with the higher bodies and access the wisdom of the soul. The generations that survived the cataclysm were so traumatized, so focused on basic survival, that the sophisticated spiritual practices were gradually forgotten. With each subsequent generation, more of the knowledge was lost, until after several millennia, humanity had fallen into what we call the Great Forgetting, a state of consciousness where most people completely identify with their temporary personalities and have completely lost awareness of their eternal spiritual nature. This forgetting was not accidental. It served important evolutionary purposes. Humanity needed to experience complete separation from the divine in order to develop strong individuality, genuine free will, and the capacity to consciously choose the path of return to union with the Source. If we had never forgotten, we would never have developed the qualities of self-determination that are essential for the next stage of cosmic evolution. But now, after millennia of experiencing the limitations of separate consciousness, humanity is beginning to remember. The vows of forgetting that were made collectively after the Atlantean trauma are beginning to dissolve. Each person who completes their own inner rebirth contributes to the collective awakening, making it progressively easier for others to access their own dormant memories and capacities. You can feel this in the acceleration that many of you experience. Time seems to move faster. Synchronicities multiply. Knowledge that in past generations required decades of study to master now opens up spontaneously for those who are prepared. This is not imagination. It is evidence that the human morphogenetic field is fundamentally transforming. Chapter 8. But I must warn you, this awakening process is not always comfortable. When you begin to remember who you truly are, the identity structures you built upon forgetting begin to crumble. Relationships that were based on your identification with limitation may not survive your expansion into truth. Jobs you tolerated when you believed you had no other options become intolerable when you reconnect with your soul's purpose. Thought and behavior patterns that were automatic must be examined and consciously transformed. This transition period, which in our tradition we called the dark night before rebirth, can feel as if everything you knew about yourselves is dying, and in a certain sense, that is exactly what is happening. The limited personality you built to function in a state of forgetting must die so that the truer identity of your soul can fully emerge. The symptoms of this transition are predictable. Periods of disorientation where you are unsure of who you are or what you want. Unusual physical sensations as your energy body reorganizes itself. Dramatic changes in sleep patterns while your astral body recalibrates. Intense emotional experiences as ancient traumas emerge to be finally processed and released. Sudden impulses to make radical changes in your life that your former self would have considered reckless or impossible. If you are experiencing these symptoms, you are not going insane, nor is something going wrong. You are going through exactly what is supposed to happen when a soul begins to awaken from the great forgetting. The key is not to resist the process, but to learn to navigate it consciously, trusting that although the death of the old identity is frightening, what emerges on the other side is infinitely more magnificent than what is being released. In our temples, we guided people through this rebirth process with specific techniques that smoothed the transition and ensured they did not get lost in the chaos of transformation. One of the most important was what we called anchoring the witness, the practice of maintaining part of your consciousness as a neutral observer even while other parts are going through emotional intensity or mental confusion. This capacity for witnessing is developed through consistent meditation where you learn to separate your consciousness from the contents of your experience. You are not your thoughts. You are the awareness that observes the thoughts. You are not your emotions. You are the conscious space where emotions arise and dissolve. You are not your body. You are the eternal presence temporarily inhabiting this physical vehicle. When you can maintain this witnessing, even during the most challenging moments of the rebirth process, you create internal stability that prevents you from being completely overwhelmed. A part of you remains serene, observing with compassion, while other parts go through what needs to be gone through. Chapter 9. I must also speak about the role of dreams in the rebirth process. In your current civilization, dreams are typically dismissed as random fantasies produced by resting brains. This is one of the most tragic losses of Atlantean knowledge. We understood that dreams are direct windows into the realms of the soul, nightly opportunities for communication with spiritual guides, and periods when deep work of healing and transformation can occur in the subtle bodies without interference from the conscious mind. During the rebirth process, your dreams will become progressively more vivid and meaningful. You will begin to have dreams that are clearly not products of processing ordinary daily experiences, but messages from higher aspects of your being or from guides who are supporting your transformation. Learn to maintain what we called a soul navigation journal, recording your dreams immediately upon waking before the details fade. Over time, patterns will emerge. Specific symbols will appear repeatedly, carrying messages about aspects of your process that require attention. People from past lives may appear, offering resolution to unfinished business. Spiritual teachers may begin to instruct you directly during sleep in techniques you will need for the next stage of your development. One of the most significant types of dreams are what we called soul remembrance dreams. These are dreams where you experience fragments of previous incarnations, particularly those that are relevant to your current work. If you were a healer in Atlantis, you might dream of working in one of our temples. If you were a teacher in ancient Egypt, you might find yourself teaching in the mystery schools. If you were a spiritual warrior in another era, you might dream of battles that were not physical, but confrontations with dark forces on subtle planes. These dreams are not mere nostalgic entertainment. They are your soul showing you capacities you developed in the past that are now available to be reactivated. After having a significant remembrance dream, dedicate time during your meditation to consciously connect with the abilities the dream revealed. Invite those aspects of your soul to integrate fully into your present awareness. You will also experience what we called prophetic dreams, where you are shown information about possible futures. These are not fixed predictions of what will inevitably happen, but visions of potential timelines that may manifest depending on the choices you make. Prophetic dreams function as maps that show you where different paths lead, allowing you to choose your direction more consciously. Chapter 10. Now I must share something of immense importance about the responsibility that accompanies inner rebirth. When you complete this process, when you fully reconnect with your multidimensional nature and reactivate your soul's capacities, you cannot simply use these powers for personal advantage and selfish comfort. The universe does not work that way. Genuine spiritual power comes with proportional responsibility to serve the evolution of the whole. The more power you develop, the more life will ask you to use it for the benefit of others as well as yourselves. This is not an arbitrary imposition from outside. It is a natural law that operates automatically. Expanded capacities naturally create expanded opportunities for service, and consistently refusing these opportunities eventually results in the loss of the capacities themselves. This was something many in Atlantis forgot in our final centuries. They developed extraordinary powers through training in our schools, but then chose to use them primarily to accumulate personal wealth, gain social status, or dominate others. The universe tolerated this for a time, but eventually the karmic consequences manifested not just for the individuals, but for our entire civilization. Do not make the same mistakes. As your capacities awaken, constantly ask, how can I use this to serve? What does the world need from me? How can my awakening contribute to the awakening of others? When you maintain this orientation of service, the universe responds by opening doors, creating synchronicities, and providing exactly the resources and opportunities you need to fulfill your soul's purpose. Your service does not need to be grandiose or publicly visible. For some, it may be as simple as maintaining stable light in your families and communities, being a presence of peace amid chaos. For others, it may involve direct teaching, healing, or visible leadership. Trust that your soul will guide you toward the forms of service that are perfectly appropriate for your unique gifts and life circumstances. I write these final words as the waters continue to rise. I know that within hours, this temple where I have served throughout my adult life will be beneath the ocean. Many of my students have already departed for higher ground, carrying what they could of our knowledge. Some of us have chosen to stay, holding the energy fields of these sacred places until the last moment, ensuring that the frequencies we have cultivated here remain imprinted in the planetary energy matrix where they can eventually be rediscovered. I feel no despair nor regret as I write. I understand that what seems like an end is actually a necessary transition. Humanity needed to go through the experience of forgetting to develop qualities that could not have been forged otherwise. And now, in your time, millennia later, the cycle is completing. Humanity is ready to remember, but this time with the maturity and wisdom that can only come from having fully experienced the consequences of separation. If these words have reached your hands, it is because you are part of this great awakening. Perhaps you were here with me in those final days. Perhaps you were one of my students, or a colleague in the temples, or simply a soul who witnessed the fall and vowed to return when the time came to rebuild what was lost. The specific circumstances matter less than the recognition that you carry within you the seeds of Atlantean wisdom, waiting for the right conditions to germinate. Those conditions are present now. Your planet is going through a transition similar to what we experienced, though with the opportunity for a different outcome. The energy frequencies of Earth are rising, facilitating types of awakening that would have been impossible just decades ago. The veil between dimensions is thinning, allowing more direct communication with spiritual guides and access to soul memories that had been blocked. But you also face challenges similar to ours. Your technologies, although different in form, possess similar potential to be used for control and manipulation instead of liberation and empowerment. Factions within your civilization seek to consolidate power over others instead of facilitating everyone's awakening. And the temptation to use spiritual knowledge for personal gain instead of collective service is as strong in your time as it was in ours. The crucial difference is that you now have the benefit of our experience. You can learn from our mistakes without needing to repeat them. You can consciously choose the path of spiritual integrity, using your awakened capacities only in alignment with the greater good. You can build a civilization that integrates spiritual wisdom with advanced technology in ways that serve the evolution of all life instead of benefiting only a privileged few. This is the true legacy I leave you. Not just the specific techniques and knowledge I have documented, but the understanding that you, each one of you who feels the call of awakening, are the bearers of a sacred lineage that stretches back through millennia and forward toward a future still to be created. Your inner rebirth is not just personal transformation, it is your contribution to the transformation of your entire species. The waters are now reaching the temple stairs. I can hear the cries of those who did not evacuate in time, but I can also perceive on the subtle planes the presence of ascended masters who have come to guide the transitions of those who will leave their physical bodies tonight. Death, I have learned after a lifetime of study, is not an end, but a transformation, another form of rebirth. I now seal this recording crystal with the highest frequencies I can channel, programming it to remain inactive until the precise moment when humanity is ready to receive its content. If you are reading this, that moment has arrived. The crystal has recognized in your energy field the frequencies of someone who is ready for the knowledge it contains. Trust the process of your own rebirth, even when it is difficult or frightening. Remember that you are not alone. You are supported by legions of beings in higher dimensions who celebrate every step you take toward remembering your true nature. And know that your individual transformation is simultaneously personal and transpersonal, benefiting you while also elevating the consciousness field of all humanity. I now walk to the upper level of the temple, where I will spend my final hours in meditation, holding the light of this sacred place while the waters claim what was once dry land. I do not fear what is coming. I have lived a life dedicated to the service of light, and I trust that my soul will continue this service in other forms, other times, other places. Until we meet again, whether in this dimension or another, I bless you with all the love that a teacher can feel for students he will never know in the flesh, but recognizes as soul family. May your rebirth be complete. May your transformation serve the greater good. And may the wisdom of Atlantis, purified through millennia of forgetting, blossom again in your hearts and minds as a guide to create the civilization of light that was always destined to be. Chapter 11. Dear seekers of the future, I continue now with what I consider the most practical portion of this record. The complete protocol we developed in the Atlantean temples to facilitate conscious inner rebirth. What I will share is not speculative theory, but empirical knowledge refined through generations of teachers who guided thousands of souls through this sacred process. The journey of rebirth is not linear or uniform for everyone, but it does progress through 7 distinct stages that are recognizable and predictable. Understanding these stages will allow you to know where you are in your own process, what specific challenges you can anticipate, and what practices will be most beneficial for facilitating your transition to the next phase. The first stage we called the awakening of the sleeper. It is the moment when, after perhaps many incarnations of complete identification with the limited personality, something within you begins to stir. You experience a growing sense that there must be more to life than what you have been experiencing. Routines that once satisfied you now feel empty. Answers you previously accepted about the meaning and purpose of existence no longer resonate as true. The symptoms of this first stage include inexplicable restlessness, a feeling of searching for something without knowing exactly what, synchronic encounters with books or people speaking of spiritual realities, vivid dreams suggesting dimensions of existence beyond the physical, and a magnetic attraction to contemplative practices, even if you were never interested in such things before. If you recognize these symptoms in your present experience, know that you are on the threshold of the journey. The most important practice for this stage is simply to pay attention. You do not yet need elaborate meditation techniques or complex rituals. You need to develop the capacity to notice the signals your soul is sending, to listen to the subtle voice of your intuition above the noise of external demands and the conditioned voices of your mind. Begin a spiritual journal where you record your dreams, synchronicities, intuitions, and moments of unexpected insight. This simple act of documenting your inner experience creates space for it to expand and communicate with you more clearly. Contemplative writing is itself a form of meditation that helps you discern which inner voices are echoes of conditioning and which are authentic communications from your higher self. Chapter 12. The second stage is the purification of the temple. Once you have awakened sufficiently to recognize that there is a spiritual path you wish to travel, you naturally begin to examine your current life and recognize everything that is not aligned with this new understanding. Destructive habits you previously ignored now become intolerable. Toxic relationships you previously tolerated now hurt in ways you can no longer deny. Negative thought patterns that operated automatically are now visible and recognized as obstacles to your growth. This stage can be intensely uncomfortable because it requires you to release attachments to things, people, and aspects of your identity that you have held for years or even your entire life. The ego fiercely resists these changes because it perceives correctly that its dominance is being threatened. You will experience what your mystical traditions call the dark night of the soul. Periods where you doubt whether the spiritual path is worth the cost it seems to require. The symptoms of this second stage include identity crises, termination of significant relationships, career changes that others consider irrational, physical cleaning of your spaces of objects that no longer resonate with who you are becoming, and periods of self-imposed solitude while you reorient internally. The crucial practice for this stage is to develop compassion for yourself during the process. Do not judge yourself for the years you spent in patterns you now recognize as limiting. Those patterns served important evolutionary purposes in their time. Honor them for what they taught you, and then release them with gratitude rather than self-criticism. The specific techniques we taught included release rituals where you would physically write on paper everything you were choosing to let go of, then ceremonially burn the paper while pronouncing declarations of release. The physical fire symbolizes and facilitates the internal alchemical fire that is transmuting your old identity into something more refined. We also used purification baths with specific mineral salts and herbs. Water, the element of emotions and psychic cleansing, can literally wash energetic impressions from your auric field when combined with conscious intention. As you immerse yourself in purifying water, visualize all dense energies, obsolete patterns, and foreign influences being dissolved and drained away, leaving your field clean and renewed. Chapter 13. The third stage is the stabilization of the observer. After having released much of what you are not, you begin to develop the capacity to maintain consciousness as a witness of your experience, rather than being completely identified with it. This is one of the most important transitions in the entire process, because it marks the beginning of genuine freedom from unnecessary suffering. When you can observe your thoughts without believing they are your thoughts, when you can feel intense emotions without being completely dominated by them, when you can recognize the dramas of the personality without being automatically dragged into reactivity, you have established what we called the throne of witness consciousness. The symptoms of this stage include increasing moments of inner peace even when external circumstances are challenging, the capacity to respond consciously rather than react automatically, a sense of internal spaciousness where there was previously compulsion and urgency, and experiences of observing your own mental process as if you were watching a movie rather than being the main character. The fundamental practice for stabilizing this stage is consistent meditation focused specifically on developing awareness of awareness itself. Sit in stillness, and instead of focusing on a particular object of meditation, simply observe the very act of observing. Who or what is aware that you are sitting here? What remains constant while thoughts, sensations, and emotions arise and dissolve? This inquiry is not intellectual, but experiential. With repeated practice, you will begin to directly recognize that there is a dimension of your being that never changes, that simply is, observing the entire flow of experience without being affected by it. This is your essential nature, and establishing a stable connection with it is a prerequisite for all subsequent stages. Chapter 14, the fourth stage we called the awakening of dormant capacities. Once you have sufficiently stabilized the witness consciousness, you naturally and spontaneously begin to develop capacities that your current culture calls psychic or paranormal, but that we recognized as simply natural functions of the fully awakened human being. Intuition becomes reliable as a primary guide. You experience knowing information about situations or people without any obvious way of having acquired that knowledge through ordinary sensory means. You can perceive the energy fields of others as sensations, colors, or direct impressions of their emotional or mental states. Dreams become progressively more lucid and usable as portals for conscious work in other dimensions. Some people at this stage begin to experience what we called vision between worlds, moments where you simultaneously perceive the physical world and the subtle realms that interpenetrate it. You may briefly see spiritual guides, thought forms, or energy structures that normally remain invisible to ordinary perception. The symptoms include intensified déjà vu experiences, prophetic dreams that verify themselves, the ability to sense when someone is thinking about you before they contact you, and moments of perceiving information about the probable future of situations you are facing. The important practice for this stage is to learn to trust and use these emerging capacities without becoming arrogant about them or dependent on them in ways that disconnect you from ordinary life. Always remember that these capacities are side effects of awakening, not its ultimate purpose. They are useful tools for navigation and service, but they are not what you are, nor what determines your spiritual worth. We developed specific exercises to refine each capacity. For amplified intuition, we practiced making small predictions about mundane events, who would call, what would happen in a certain meeting, and then observed how accurate our intuitions were. Not to develop pride about successes, but to calibrate when intuition is clear versus when desire or fear is coloring our perceptions. For energy perception, we practiced closing our eyes and feeling the fields of plants, animals, or people at different distances. Over time, we learned to discern subtle differences that indicated health versus illness, coherence versus fragmentation, openness versus closure in the systems we perceived. Chapter 15, the fifth stage, is the integration of the shadows. As your capacities expand and your consciousness elevates, paradoxically, you also become more aware of aspects of yourself that you had been denying or suppressing. Everything you have judged as unacceptable about yourself and pushed into the shadow of the unconscious must now be confronted, recognized, and integrated. This stage is often confusing for spiritual seekers because they expect spiritual progress to mean becoming progressively more pure or good, when in reality it means becoming more complete, which requires recognizing and integrating all parts of yourself, even those you would prefer to deny. The symptoms include confrontation with your own capacity for jealousy, anger, manipulation, or cruelty. Recognition of how you have hurt others even while seeing yourself as victims. Awareness of selfish motivations operating beneath actions you rationalized as altruistic. And encounters with what psychologist Carl Jung would call the shadow archetype. That part of you that contains everything you have rejected about your human nature. The crucial practice is to develop what we called radical compassion toward all of your human experience, including the aspects you find less kind. Your tendencies toward the shadow are not defects that must be eradicated, but energies that have been distorted and need to be understood, accepted, and transformed. The rituals we facilitated involved conscious dialogue with shadow aspects. In deep meditation, you would invite any part of yourself you had been rejecting to emerge. When it appeared, instead of fleeing in horror, you would confront it with compassionate curiosity. Why do you exist? What need are you trying to fulfill? What happened that distorted you into this form? You would frequently discover that the darkest aspects of your shadow are legitimate energies, like power, desire, or self-protection, that were traumatized or condemned and became distorted as a result. When you recognize them with compassion rather than judgment, they naturally begin to transform back toward their healthy expressions. Chapter 16, the sixth stage, is the sacred inner marriage. After having integrated the shadows, you arrive at the unification of the internal polarities, masculine and feminine, light and darkness, spirit and matter, action and receptivity. This unification creates what the alchemical traditions called the divine androgen, or the complete being. This is not about denying differences or becoming neutralized, but about developing fluid access to the entire spectrum of human qualities without being trapped in rigid identification with one pole or the other. You can be firm when the situation requires it, and soft when it is appropriate. You can give generously and receive graciously. You can act decisively and surrender completely. The symptoms of this stage include the resolution of internal conflicts that had plagued you for years, a feeling of being complete in yourselves without needing others to complete you, and the capacity to relate to others from integrity rather than from lack. Romantic relationships for people in this stage transform fundamentally, becoming unions of already complete beings who choose to share their completeness rather than seeking for the other to fill their voids. The practices involved what we called polarity dances, ceremonial movements, where you would consciously alternate between expressing masculine and feminine energies, allowing your body to learn the fluidity that your psyche was integrating. We also used breathing techniques where we alternated between nostrils, recognizing that the right nostril connects with solar masculine energies and the left with lunar feminine energies. The central visualization involved imagining within your heart a union of two flames, a golden one representing the masculine and a silver one representing the feminine, merging into a single flame of white light that contained both qualities perfectly balanced. This unified flame would then expand to fill your entire being, reorganizing all your energies according to this new pattern of integration. Chapter 17, the seventh and final stage, is the birth of the Christic being. We did not use this term in reference to a specific religious figure, but to describe the state of consciousness where the individual human being recognizes itself as a unique expression of universal cosmic consciousness, carrying within itself the same divine nature that animates all of creation. In this stage, the illusion of separation dissolves not only as an intellectual understanding, but as a reality lived moment to moment. You directly experience that there is no real separation between you and others, between you and nature, between you and the divine. Everything is recognized as different expressions of the one life dancing with itself in infinitely varied forms. The symptoms include periods of spontaneous ecstasy without external cause, perception of light radiating from all things, experiences of unconditional love so vast that it seems your heart will expand beyond your capacity to contain it, and unshakable certainty about the fundamentally benevolent nature of existence, even while you recognize the suffering that exists in the world. People who reach this stage often radiate a presence that others can feel as deep peace, unconditional love, or ancient wisdom. They do not need to proclaim their realization. It is evident in how they move through the world, how they respond to challenges, and the effect their mere presence has on others. There is no specific practice that causes this seventh stage because it is not an achievement that can be forced, but a grace that emerges naturally when all the previous preparations are complete. However, you can create favorable conditions through complete surrender of the illusion of control, absolute trust in the wisdom of the universe, and unwavering dedication to the service of the greater good. In our temples, this stage was facilitated by what we called fire initiations, ceremonies where the initiate was guided through experiences designed to completely dissolve any remaining resistance to the truth of their divine nature. I cannot describe these ceremonies in detail here, because they must be experienced under the direct guidance of a realized master, but I assure you that when your time comes, the appropriate teachers will appear on your path. Chapter 18. Now I must share the specific techniques we developed for reprogramming the energy body. These practices were central to our work because we understood that the physical body can only be transformed sustainably when the subtle energetic bodies that sustain it are first reconfigured. The fundamental technique of aura cleansing we called the violet light bath. This practice uses the highest frequency of the visible spectrum to dissolve and transmute dense energies that have accumulated in your energy field through interactions with toxic environments, negative people, or your own destructive thought and emotion patterns. Sit in meditation and visualize a flame of violet light burning approximately 1 meter above your head. This flame has qualities of both physical fire that burns impurities and water that washes and purifies. Invite this violet flame to descend upon you like a waterfall of liquid light, flowing over and through your entire physical body and auric field. As this violet light flows through you, visualize it finding and dissolving any energy that is not in perfect alignment with your divine nature. You will see or feel these dense energies as dark spots, knots, or areas of constriction that the violet light finds and instantly transmutes into pure light. Continue this visualization for at least 15 minutes daily for 30 days if you wish to deeply cleanse entrenched patterns. Some sensitive practitioners may experience during the first few days symptoms of what we called a healing crisis, fatigue, intense emotions surfacing to be processed, or a need to sleep more as the physical body adjusts to the energetic reorganizations occurring. Chapter 19. The second reprogramming technique involved the use of sacred sounds we called the tones of creation. We, as your Hindu tradition preserved in the concept of mantras, understood that certain sounds, when pronounced with correct technique, can directly reorganize the energy patterns in the subtle bodies. The universal master tone is what you write as O-M, but which should be pronounced as a continuous sound that begins with A, transitions through U, and ends with M. This sound replicates the sequence of creation, preservation, and dissolution that governs all cycles in the universe. When you pronounce O-M correctly, the physical vibrations of the sound resonate through your body, but more importantly, the subtle frequencies of the sound resonate through your energy bodies, reorganizing them toward more coherent and harmonious configurations. It is like using a tuning fork to tune a detuned musical instrument. The pure tone of Om retunes your entire being to its optimal frequency. The practice consists of pronouncing OM for at least 108 repetitions, which in our sacred numerology represents completeness and perfection. But do not count mechanically. Instead, use a mala, a prayer bead necklace, passing one bead through your fingers with each repetition so your mind can remain focused on the quality and vibration of the sound rather than on counting numbers. We varied the tone of the OM depending on which subtle body needed more attention. Low tones resonate primarily with the physical and etheric bodies. Middle tones affect the emotional and mental bodies. High tones connect with the higher spiritual bodies. Experiment to discover which tones generate the most powerful sensations of resonance and transformation in your particular system. We also used what we called language of light, sequences of sounds that are not words in the conventional sense, but that carry codes of information that can directly reprogram the energy body. These sounds emerge spontaneously when you allow your voice to express itself without censorship from the rational mind during states of deep meditation. If you feel impulses to make unusual sounds during your practice, do not suppress them thinking they are meaningless nonsense. Allow them to emerge freely. These are frequently communications from your higher self, using your vocal apparatus to transmit precise frequencies that your subtle bodies need to reorganize appropriately. Chapter 20. The third fundamental reprogramming technique involved visualizations of sacred geometry. We understood that the energy bodies respond powerfully to specific geometric forms because these forms represent archetypal patterns of organization that operate at all levels of creation. The central visualization was what we called the Seal of Perfection, a six-pointed star formed by two interlocking triangles, one pointing upward, representing spirit descending into matter, the other pointing downward, representing matter ascending towards spirit. This symbol, which various traditions preserved in different ways, represents the perfect integration of opposite polarities. Visualize this six-pointed star of bright golden light in the center of your chest at heart level. See it pulsing with each heartbeat, expanding slightly with each inhalation and contracting slightly with each exhalation. As this geometric form stabilizes in your visualization, it will begin to radiate its pattern of perfection through all your subtle bodies, reorganizing them according to divine proportions. With practice, you can expand this visualization to include additional geometric forms. A circle of silvery light spinning around the star represents protection and completeness. A golden spiral emanating from the center of the star and extending outward represents growth and evolution. These combined geometries create a personal mandala of transformation that works continuously in your energy field to maintain alignment with your original divine design. Chapter 21. Now I must share the methods we used to recover soul memories from previous incarnations. This work was considered advanced in our temples because accessing memories of past lives without proper preparation can be disorienting or even traumatizing if one lacks the necessary context and integration skills. The basic technique we taught was called the soul journey. It requires entering a deep trance state that is between sleep and wakefulness, where ordinary consciousness quiets sufficiently for deeper memories to emerge, but you remain conscious enough to observe and remember what you experience. Lie down comfortably in a position where you can remain completely still for at least 30 minutes. Close your eyes and begin with deep rhythmic breathing, counting to 4 on the inhalation, holding for 4 counts, exhaling for 4 counts, holding empty for 4 counts. This square breathing pattern progressively induces deeper states of relaxation and receptivity. Once you feel your body completely relaxed and your mind quiet, formulate internally a specific question or intention about which past life memory would be most useful for you to access at this moment. Perhaps you want to understand the origin of an irrational fear that limits you, or you wish to recover skills you developed in previous incarnations, or you need to understand karmic patterns you are repeating. After formulating the intention, simply observe what images, sensations, or knowings begin to emerge in your awareness. At first, they may be fragmentary or vague. A brief image of an unknown place, a sensation of being a different gender or age, a knowing about circumstances from another life. Do not try to force or elaborate these impressions. Simply allow them to unfold naturally. With repeated practice, these visions will become clearer and more detailed until you experience memories of past lives with the same vividness as memories of events from your current childhood. You will be able to see places, people, complete events unfolding before your inner perception. Chapter 22. It is crucial to understand that not all visions that emerge during this work are necessarily literal memories of previous lives. Some may be symbolic constructions that your psyche uses to communicate truths about your karmic patterns without presenting them as specific historical narratives. What matters is not whether the details are literally accurate, but whether the material that emerges provides useful insights for your present transformation. After each memory recovery session, spend time integrating what you have seen. Write it in your journal with as much detail as you can remember. Contemplate what connections you can see between those past events and patterns in your current life. And formulate specific intentions about how you will use what you have learned to evolve beyond repeating the same mistakes or limitations. If you discover significant traumas from past lives that need healing, you can apply the same energetic reprogramming techniques I described earlier, but directed specifically toward the impressions those traumas left in your causal body. Visualize transmuting violet light flowing backward through time to heal the wound at the moment it occurred, freeing your soul from continuing to carry that weight through subsequent incarnations. For those specifically interested in reconnecting with your Atlantean or Lemurian lineage, formulate this intention explicitly during your memory recovery sessions. Many of you who are drawn to this material did indeed have incarnations during those periods, and the memories of those lives contain knowledge and capacities that can be reactivated in your present awareness. When you access Atlantean memories, you may experience recognition of specific places where our main temples were located, remember ceremonies or trainings you participated in, or reconnect with teachers or study companions from that time, some of whom may be incarnated in your present time and destined to reunite with you. Chapter 23. Now in these final pages, I must speak from my deepest heart about the responsibility and purpose of inner rebirth. What I have shared are not simply techniques for personal development or improvement of your individual life, although they will certainly produce those effects. The deeper purpose is to prepare you to serve the consciousness elevation of your entire species during this critical period of planetary transition. Your civilization is at a choice point similar to the one we faced. You can continue the path of separation, materialism, and exploitation that will eventually lead to catastrophic collapse. Or you can consciously choose the path of integration, practical spirituality, and conscious stewardship that will lead to sustainable flourishing for all life on your planet. The difference between these futures will be determined by how many individuals complete their own inner rebirth and begin to live from awakened consciousness. Each person who transforms creates ripples in the collective morphogenetic field that facilitate the awakening of others. It is literally true that your personal transformation contributes to global transformation. But you must understand that inner rebirth is not spiritual escapism. It is not about withdrawing from the world into meditative bliss while ignoring the suffering and challenges around you. It is about transforming yourself sufficiently so that you can engage with the world from wisdom, compassion, and genuine power, rather than from reactivity, fear, and limitation. Awakened beings are not passive. They are active agents of positive change, working tirelessly to create more just social systems, more sustainable technologies, more conscious relationships, and life structures that honor the interconnectedness of all existence. But they work from internal centeredness rather than from neurotic compulsion, and from love rather than from anger. I visualize a future where your civilization will have learned the lessons we failed to learn, where technology is developed in harmony with spiritual principles rather than in contradiction to them, where power is distributed equitably rather than concentrated in the hands of a few, where education cultivates soul capacities in addition to intellectual skills, and where every important decision is made considering not only immediate benefit, but also impact on the next 7 generations. This future is possible. It is waiting to be chosen. And you, Each one who reads these words are part of the generation that will determine which path your species takes. You cannot delegate this responsibility to political leaders or external experts. Each one must become the change they wish to see, completing their own inner rebirth and then living from that transformed consciousness in every aspect of their existence. Allow me to be specific about what it means to live as a reborn being. It does not mean flawlessness or absence of challenges. It means maintaining conscious connection with your divine nature, even while navigating the complexities of human existence. It means responding from wisdom rather than reacting from old programming. It means choosing love over fear, inclusion over separation, collaboration over competition. In practical terms, it means bringing your meditation from the cushion into your lives. Every interaction with another person becomes an opportunity to practice conscious presence and compassionate communication. Every consumption decision becomes an opportunity to support systems that honor life. Every moment of work becomes an opportunity to serve the greater good rather than solely personal gain. It means you can no longer unconsciously participate in systems that cause harm, even when they benefit your personal interests in the short term. When your consciousness awakens sufficiently, your sensitivity to the consequences of your choices becomes so acute that you can no longer tolerate contributing to unnecessary suffering, even indirectly. Chapter 24, Relationships. Transform when you operate from a reborn being. You no longer seek for others to fill your voids or validate your worth. Instead, you relate from fullness, offering your authentic presence and allowing others to reveal themselves as they truly are without projecting your expectations onto them. The conflicts that arise, and they will arise because you are human, become opportunities for deep spiritual practice rather than dramas that consume you. You learn to see each person as a soul on their own evolutionary journey, doing the best they can given their current level of awakening. This does not mean you tolerate abusive behavior or remain in toxic relationships, but that even when you establish necessary boundaries or choose to end relationships, you do so from compassion rather than from condemnatory judgment. The work you choose to do transforms when you follow the guidance of your soul rather than solely financial security or social prestige considerations. You discover that when you align with your soul's purpose, the universe provides what you need, although perhaps not always in the ways your mind anticipated. You learn to trust this process, even when it requires going through periods of uncertainty that your ego finds frightening. Your creativity expands exponentially because you are no longer limited by the voices of doubt and self-criticism that previously stifled your authentic expression. Whether you express yourself through art, writing, music, entrepreneurship, parenting, teaching, or any other vehicle, your creativity flows with natural grace when you are connected to your internal source. Your health improves because the reborn body operates as a continuous healing system that maintains optimal balance. This does not mean you will never experience physical challenges, but that your body has enhanced capacity for self-regulation and recovery. You also develop refined sensitivity to your body's signals, allowing you to address imbalances at early stages before they manifest as serious illnesses. But perhaps the most profound change is in your subjective experience of existence itself. Life no longer feels like a struggle against hostile forces or an effort to reach some future state of happiness. It becomes a growing recognition that you are already complete, you are already home, and life is a sacred dance rather than a test you must pass. This does not mean that everything is always easy or pleasant. You continue to experience the full range of human emotions and face genuine challenges. But your relationship with these experiences transforms fundamentally. You no longer resist what is, nor completely identify with your temporary experiences. You maintain awareness of the eternal dimension of your being that remains at peace even while the surface level of your experience may be going through turbulence. Chapter 25. Now I must offer you my final blessing and farewell. If you have reached this point in reading my journal, you have received everything I can transmit through words. The rest of your journey must be lived, experienced directly, not merely understood intellectually. Trust the process of your own rebirth even when it is difficult or confusing. Remember that every challenge you face is an opportunity for deep spiritual practice, not an obstacle on your path, but the path itself. Difficulties do not mean you are doing something wrong. They often indicate that you are doing exactly what you need to do for your transformation. Be patient with yourselves. Inner rebirth is not a race nor a competition. Each soul progresses at its own pace according to its unique evolutionary plan. Comparing yourself to others is useless because each person has different lessons to learn, different gifts to develop, and unique ways to serve the collective awakening. Seek community with others who are on the path of awakening. Transformation is possible in isolation, but it is much easier and more joyful when you have fellow travelers who understand what you are experiencing and can offer support during challenging periods. At the same time, do not depend completely on external community. Cultivate the connection with your internal source that remains constant even when all external relationships change. Honor your teachers, but do not idolize them. All genuine teaching points beyond itself toward the truth that each one must discover directly. The best teachers do not create dependence, but empower students to trust their own internal wisdom. If a teacher demands your blind submission or claims to have a monopoly on truth, walk away no matter how charismatic or seemingly enlightened they appear. Remember that knowledge without practice is sterile. You can read 1,000 books on spirituality, attend hundreds of workshops, and memorize all the teachings, but if you do not apply this knowledge through consistent, disciplined practice, it remains as dead information instead of transforming into lived wisdom. Even 15 minutes daily of genuine practice are more valuable than hours of accumulating theoretical knowledge. At the same time, do not become so rigid in your practice that it becomes another form of spiritual ego. The purpose of techniques is to facilitate transformation, not to become prisons that limit you. As you evolve, your practices will need to evolve as well. Remain flexible and responsive to the guidance of your soul about which practices serve you best at each stage of your journey. Chapter 26. Now, with the waters reaching the threshold of this final chamber, I close this record with my hopes and blessings for you and for your entire civilization. I trust that enough of you will complete your inner rebirth to create the critical mass necessary to elevate your entire species to the next stage of consciousness evolution. I visualize a time, perhaps only generations in your future, when children will be born naturally with conscious connection to their multidimensional nature, and will be raised in cultures that honor and cultivate this connection instead of suppressing it. When education will include the development of soul capacities as a central curriculum. When healing will be holistic, addressing energetic causes of illness rather than merely treating physical symptoms. I see cities designed according to principles of sacred geometry that facilitate elevated consciousness in their inhabitants. Technologies that work in harmony with the natural energies of the planet instead of violating them. Economic systems that measure success not in the accumulation of wealth, but in the flourishing of all life. And governments that operate as conscious stewards serving the good of all, rather than as instruments of control serving the interests of elites. I see a humanity that has learned to communicate telepathically, reducing misunderstandings and facilitating genuine collaboration. That can travel consciously outside the physical body exploring other dimensions of reality with the same naturalness with which you now explore different geographical locations. That can access Akashic records to recover wisdom from all ages, and that has developed capacities for conscious manifestation that allow for creating realities that serve the greater good with an efficiency you would now consider miraculous. But more than any specific capacity, I see a humanity that has remembered its true nature as individualized expressions of divine consciousness, and that lives from this recognition in every moment. A humanity that has transcended the illusion of separation and built a civilization based on the truth of interconnection. This is the future that is possible when enough individuals complete their inner rebirth. This is the legacy that Atlantean wisdom, purified through millennia of forgetting, can help create if you choose to receive it and apply it. This is the potential awaiting your activation. The waters are now flooding this chamber. I can feel the cold rising up my legs as I write these final words. But I feel no fear. I have lived fully. I have served faithfully, and I trust completely in the wisdom of the divine plan that orchestrates all things. My body will die tonight, but my soul will continue. And a part of my consciousness will remain connected to these records, available to guide those who open themselves to receive it. If you invoke me with sincerity, whether in meditation or in moments of need on your rebirth journey, I will respond. Perhaps not in a form that your rational mind can verify, but in ways that your soul will recognize. To all who read these words through the veil of time, I bless you with all the love that a teacher can feel for students he will never know in physical form, but recognizes as eternal companions on the soul's journey. May your rebirth be complete. May your transformation serve the good of all. And may the wisdom of the ages, preserved through the cycles of the rise and fall of civilizations, finally find its perfect expression in the awakened hearts of your generation. The future is not written in stone. It is created moment by moment by the choices each one makes. Choose wisely. Choose consciously. Choose the path of awakening, not because it is easy, but because it is the only path that leads to the fullness your soul yearns for. The recording crystals are now sealed. This knowledge will wait patiently until those who are destined to receive it are prepared. If you have found it, it means that moment has arrived for you. Do not waste this opportunity. The universe does not offer such gifts casually. Be reborn, my dear ones. Be reborn completely and gloriously, and then help others to remember who they truly are, so that together you can create the world we have glimpsed, a world where the divine and the human dance in perfect harmony, where wisdom guides action, and where love is the fundamental law governing all relationships. With infinite love and unshakable trust in your success, Atlan Ra, guardian of the third temple of light. In the final hour of the final night of Atlantis, may the eternal light shine upon your path now and forever.